Cisco, what happened to everybody?
That is something you're gonna have to see for yourself.
You're from before she dies, aren't you?
2024, I made it.
Tell me who Savitar is. We'll stop him before he even tries.
You are gonna be so surprised when you find out.
You're in for a world of pain.
The Flash. All new episodes return Tuesday, April 25th on the CW.
Greetings and salutations, YouTube. Today I'm here with a video about who Savitar really is, and I'm gonna mainly use clues from the episode 19 trailer, the extended one that just came out. Among many popular theories, there have been like, Barry is Savitar, HR is Savitar, Jay Garrick is Savitar, Julian is Savitar. I even heard one that said Captain Cold was Savitar, which are a few of the theories that I will be addressing in the video. So let's get started. I think I'll start with HR, and I know that many people on the internet have been guessing at this for almost the entire season now, and of course there are reasons for that, and a few of them I'm just gonna summarize. Tom Cavanaugh is coming back as a different character and all of these things. Like, for example, after Flashpoint, he was talking into his creepy microphone, just like Harry was when he was trying to steal Barry's speed back in season 2. But instead of being guilty of murder like Harry was, he was writing a romance novel. And I don't believe HR is Savitar, mainly because HR is this comic relief, and he's quirky, he's fun, I don't believe that HR is Savitar, and this comes from many places. For one, since Dante died, Cisco hasn't really been at the jokes as much as he normally was back in season 1 and 2. Because Cisco doesn't exist as this laughy, go-lucky character anymore, he's really become this vibe persona. Like, he knows everything, but he won't tell you, and he's hiding so much behind his smile, as he says, or Caitlin says at some point. So HR has become this, like, laughable, geeky dude, and it's a really cool character for Tom Cavanaugh to play, but also with him directing the episode 2 weeks from now, it will mean that HR won't really be in this episode. I mean, and if you take it from someone who believes HR is Savitar's perspective, HR being suspiciously absent from an episode is a little bit fishy. But unfortunately, I think that along with him being absent from the musical crossover, the CW made the decisions as to who would sing and who would not. And so I think that by just leaving HR out of the whole musical crossover business, except for being at the very end where he found common trait he shared with the Music Meister. And putting all of that aside anyway, he already played the villain in season 1. That's why they cast him to be Eobard Thawne. And when Eobard was erased from existence and given his own spot on Legends, the whole Harrison Wells being the big bad has gotten a little, shall we say, old? In season 2, even, Jay Garrick, who was actually Hunter Zolomon, he was the big bad, and so I have reason to believe that even though all of this evidence has been pitted against him, and I think that the CW has done a very good job of misleading us this whole season, and I'm not saying that they want us to think that HR is Savitar, but they were dropping clues left and right in the earlier episodes, especially right after Flashpoint, and they were hunting for a new Harrison Wells. And I just think before we move on, which I am just about ready to do, that the CW, I'm really frustrated, but you know, you're doing good work. So next up is a character that many people believe to be Savitar. and I'm pretty sure you already know who it is. Barry Allen. So in the new episode 19 trailer, the episode is called The Once and Future Flash, which is awesome because there was a New 52 comic and the CW has been known to borrow from the comics. But back to this trailer, it just shows how they're using the storyline about the Reverse Flash, which I'm sure you can find a summary anywhere. I'm probably just reiterating information that I found about this comic. I read it at some point. I have a lot of comics. Anyway, I know that even I am getting tired of the summaries. So, the Once and Future Flash, many people think that Barry is Savitar, or something along the lines of the Time Remnant from Season 2 being Savitar, which is a theory I came up on my own, and then I realized that a lot of people were thinking that as well. Just mainly because the Time Remnant that Barry made in Season 2, by splitting himself and creating a alternate version of himself, I cannot even begin to explain. The DC multiverse theory exists in The Flash, where there are multiple universes that are all vibrating at different frequencies. And so, keeping this in mind, Barry creates what's called a time remnant when he runs back in time at the end of Season 2. And me explaining the DC multiverse theory is in no way accounting for why Barry creates this time remnant. But just in case if you're in need of a refresher, here it is anyway. So in addition to the multiverse theory, The Flash also uses what's called the usurped timeline theory, where changes to an already established point in a given timeline is basically what sets the whole thing. And so, for example, we see this on Legends a lot. If there was a point in time where Germany lost World War I, and this was very important for World War II to begin, and because it's so important, this becomes what's called an anchor point. And so if something happens to the timeline, in which case Germany wins World War I, an entire new timeline or an entire new Earth is created. And so in the end you have two Earths, one in which Germany won World War I and one in which they lost, which is kind of like the one we're living in now. Which I suppose makes sense because the universe is constantly expanding. And like this theory in The Flash, it also is true. The first time Barry ever time traveled, he went back in time to prevent Weather Wizard from destroying Central City. Even though he did it accidentally, the first timeline, the original timeline that he lived in, is now what's called a loose thread. Because Barry broke the time barrier and changed the outcome, the first timeline ended right when Barry first went back in time. It has and will always exist, but it will end the moment Barry went back in time. And in that episode, Barry is seen replacing himself. And because he did this, the other Barry unfortunately became a time wraith. I'm not sure if it's known that the second time Barry travels back in time in Season 2 to find out how to get faster, if it's the same time wraith from the previous timeline, and this is gonna sound confusing, but in Season 2, when he goes back in time to meet Eobard Thawne, who's pretending to be Harrison Wells, in the second timeline, I believe, because the first timeline is the one where Barry, the original Barry, who became a time wraith after the Weather Wizard debacle. And in my opinion, you can't really call him the original Barry because the Barry we know and love is already there. And this is where the really complicated part comes in. So if a speedster goes back in time to a point where he or she doesn't replace their earlier self, a time remnant, not a wraith, a time remnant, occurs once a significant change has been made. The time-traveling speedster has a higher priority to the timeline, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because you can't harm an earlier version of yourself without it affecting you. And this is where the Speed Force enters the equation. Barry entering the Speed Force means that he has entered a sort of dimensional barrier, and the Speed Force is also really kind of stupid, just in the sense that it's a sort of safeguard for the CW, for the TV show. And so technically they can't really kill a speedster, and of course there are ways to, but if they really didn't want to end a speedster's life, say Wally or Barry, then they can just say, oh, the Speed Force will preserve them, which is one of the only reasons why Eobard Thawne is on Legends right now at all. But this whole explanation, although wordy and very, very long, provides some reason for why Savitar could be the Time Remnant Barry. And so perhaps the Speed Force preserved the Time Remnant Barry, much like it did Eobard Thawne. There is some room to be skeptical here because the CW will most likely lose viewers because, in my opinion, it's bad storytelling. And this brings us back to the Season 3, Episode 19 trailer, The Once and Future Flash. In this trailer, we see future Barry, and he is completely heartbroken because of Iris's death. He says, "You're from before she dies, aren't you?" while looking very scruffy and in need of a haircut. And in the trailer, we don't get to see or hear any mention of who Savitar really is. And since I've already thrown out the HR theory, I think I'll just keep adding more evidence for the Time Remnant Barry thing. While some people might say, oh no, it can't be Time Remnant Barry, because Savitar was the first speedster. He's called a god for a reason, right? Well, on a technicality, and again, they've already used this with the Eobard Thawne thing. Like, why is he even alive at all? And the answer to that question is that viewers want him. We can't get enough of Eobard Thawne. And so there's always that Speed Force plot hole where time doesn't exist. But making a return to the timeline theory, although technical, could make a whole lot of sense. If a timeline changes around a speedster while they are traveling through the event that changes the timeline, the Speed Force will preserve that speedster, especially if they are integral to maintaining the timeline without creating a bigger paradox. So, while the Time Remnant Barry and the Barry that we have now, the Barry that created Flashpoint, and the Barry that is existing on two fronts in the Once and Future Flash episode, episode 19, we're running around the giant hamster wheel to destroy the multiverse with Zoom in season 2. The Time Remnant Barry, who was actually just the same Barry, one of them ran fast enough to be absorbed by the Speed Force, and the other one survived. But, my friends, this is where it gets all sorts of trippy. The Barry that didn't get absorbed by the Speed Force ran back in time and created Flashpoint, leaving the old timeline behind, and as I stated before, what other speedster is integral to maintaining the timeline without creating a bigger paradox? The paradox, of course, is the existence of the Time Remnant in the first place, and the circumstances as to why it was created anyway. And in order to defeat Zoom, Barry went back in time to a point where he didn't replace his earlier self because Hunter Zolomon assumed that he wouldn't be able to do it, and so it would be a massive surprise. And while I love entertaining myself with this theory, I know it's not plausible. The writers of The Flash would never use this as a main sort of plot. And that's because Eobard Thawne being on Legends is a technicality because fans want the actor, and not because it simply makes any sense according to the logic of the show, which it does, but they would still never do it. Anyway, I'd like to know what your Savitar theories are. I've probably read them all in the comments somewhere on some other video, but feel free to leave a like or subscribe. This is a brand new channel, by the way. This is my first ever video, and I am so nervous to hear what you guys think. I began doing this channel. Most of the fan theory reviews come from young men, and I am a young girl, so I decided to try it out. breaking the stereotype and all that. Anyway, thanks for watching. I will have another video up, and I was lucky enough to see one of the scenes from the season finale filmed, which is another reason why I started this channel. That video will be up shortly. So thank you for watching and listening to my voice.